or requirements that would address these legitimate problems with big tech. One issue that I continue to grapple with that really is a challenge, I think we have to think about it as we consider legislation in the tech space, involves the potential for deeper entrenchment of market incumbents. Dr. Eccles, I'd like to start with you. Government regulation can be expensive in terms of compliance costs, correct? It costs a lot. Not everybody can do it. Those who are already there, those who have already arrived, who can afford a team of compliance specialists and accountants and lawyers, have some advantage to the point where entry can be difficult to impossible. Do you agree that regulation can have this kind of an effect?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I think we've actually seen some of that in the context of GDPR, the European privacy regulation, where there's evidence that increased consolidation as many firms stopped doing business with all but the biggest players who could ensure compliance.
So is there a way to thread that needle? How do we undertake that balance?
That's a great question, Senator, because I think actually as bad as some of the big tech giants are, often it's the smaller players who are doing some of the most Wild West things with our data. So it's not that they should somehow be exempted from all of these considerations. I'd say one of the challenges with what we saw with GDPR was just how much ambiguity there was. So I would really hope that lawmakers would really be quite clear and precise in the laws, or at least the policymaking that happens administratively.
And statutory ambiguity tends to lead to regulatory complexity. Regulatory complexity itself further entrenches incumbents. It's a subsidy of sorts, a subsidy on the wealthy and well-entrenched. I've got grave concerns about how tech companies can use their algorithms to harm users. Sometimes it's through censorship, sometimes it's through recommending inappropriate content to children. We actually see a lot of both of those things. But we shouldn't underestimate how government solutions can often end up potentially making that situation worse. That being said, transparency can be a good first step as a means to inform consumers. So in your view, what does transparency look like in the algorithm space, and how can we balance that with the need to protect intellectual property?
Thanks, Senator. I think there's a lot of opportunities for transparency that wouldn't necessarily disclose a lot of the core intellectual property, because so much of that is often in the context of making a specific prediction for a person, that this person is going to like this content, that they're going to watch this video for at least 30 seconds, right? But then what do you do with that prediction? How much do you weight that in your decision making? That's more of a managerial decision, and that can be disclosed. So you can say something broad about what are the inputs to this prediction, and you can disclose what's done with that prediction, even if the prediction itself is made by some deep neural network with billions of parameters involved. So I think that's one angle for transparency. The other one is that these companies are constantly doing randomized controlled trials to compare different algorithms internally, to weigh a lot of different metrics, some that are just engagement metrics, but some that are metrics of potential harm. They could disclose more of the results from those. As actually, I've relied in my testimony on the leaked Facebook files that covered one such A/B test that was conducted by Facebook, comparing their status quo feed with a reverse chronological feed, which ended up making them more money. In fact, showing they weren't optimizing just for money making, but also had a bunch of other harms. Those kinds of comparisons are really useful. And so I'd like to see a lot more openness about those in algorithmic impact and transparency reports.
Sunlight can be an effective illuminator and disinfectant. I'd like to conclude with one thought. Algorithms and the use of machine learning technology are undoubtedly a necessary piece of technology to deal with. To deal specifically with the continued use of the internet and the increased activity that we see on the internet. We also know this technology can be used for nefarious ends, and we certainly want to stop those activities. I think we need to approach this challenge with humility, understanding that the federal government's intervention into these complex issues could and probably would do a lot of things to make the situation worse. Government regulation could end up hamstringing companies' ability to innovate and evolve with emerging technology used by bad actors and empowering such bad actors to easily circumvent the technological standards adopted by government, which would almost inevitably become outdated the moment they were enacted. There are certainly worthy challenges, challenges that I think Congress has to consider and try to deal with in whatever way we can responsibly. But I can't emphasize enough to my colleagues that we should urge caution, and we shouldn't be thinking that government solutions don't have great potential to set us back even further in pursuing policy updates in our internet laws. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lee. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.